So today's topic is insomnia, and it's insomnia ghost stories. So usually I would make an intro talking about something about insomnia and ghosts and not being able to sleep. But today I wanted to make something a little bit more real and a little bit more serious, I guess. So I did have trouble falling asleep when I was younger, especially. When I was a kid and when I was a teenager, especially on Sunday nights when I would have to go to school the next morning. Probably because I was anxious, I didn't like school that much, I didn't want to go, or I had too exciting of a weekend, stimulants. That was also another thing for myself where I wasn't able to sleep. If I played too many video games as a kid, received too much stimulation as a kid, I would become too hyper. And even when I was like a preteen, so like 12 to 13 years old, if I gamed a lot during the daytime, I would not be able to sleep at nighttime. And it was a real problem for me, and I had to face it for many, many years. So insomnia is something real that did happen to me. But for those of you guys who are suffering from insomnia, don't think about ghosts. That thing doesn't help you fall asleep at all. But one thing that I feel like would help you is a method I actually thought of, just recently developed. I mean, as I got older, I stopped not being able to sleep, especially after starting this YouTube channel, because as you're just so tired, you have no time to not sleep, basically, right? So, but after I developed this method, I felt like it's really helped me just go into deep sleep. And I think that for those with insomnia, I'm not sure it'll certainly cure you of that plague, but at least maybe it will be of some benefit to you. And if you guys do want to try it, I strongly encourage you to go and try it. Basically, when I feel like I can't sleep, or that I want to get into a deep sleep, a deep slumber, sometimes I just want to play on my computer all the time, right? Even when I'm on my bed, I basically think that I think about the other part of the world. And what that means is that because I always take an airplane, I travel a lot. I go to Asia, I go to a lot of places, and I live in North America. But the time zones are different in Asia and in North America. So in Asia, if it's like 8 in the morning, it's 8 p.m. at night in Canada per se, right? So I would just imagine that, okay, and this was like, it's like totally I'm trying to hypnotize myself. Okay, so this whole day I've been going through it, in Asia time, it's nighttime. And during this whole day, it's supposed to be nighttime. I'm supposed to be sleeping. I'm supposed to be resting. But I've been walking around doing stuff all day. And this is my opportunity to sleep now, to finally sleep now. Because after this long day of no sleep, walking around doing all this stuff, even though in Asia, when I lived in Asia, this was a time I was supposed to be asleep in bed, I didn't get the opportunity to do that. So, I'm going to use my best abilities to try to get as much sleep as I can to make it up for the day I miss sleeping, walking around doing stuff in the sun. That is, I know it's unrealistic. You know that obviously after a couple of days your body basically understands and reinvents itself. So daytime is daytime and nighttime is nighttime. You don't have jet lag anymore. But I don't know, I feel like jet lag for me, because I travel so much, has always put me in the deepest sleep. And having this mentality in the back of my mind, pulling it out whenever I need to use it, and using it to help myself fall asleep and cure my insomnia, is something I honestly recently developed, and I don't know if it'll help you guys out, but if you guys do have insomnia, try it out and see if it helps you out. I don't know, it works for me. So without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for True Scary Insomnia Ghost Stories number 2. The Man Downstairs. About 5 years back, my husband, son, and I were living in an apartment complex. We were fortunate enough that we knew all our neighbors, and everyone frequently got together out back for grilling out and nights of drinking by the fire pit. It was such a comfortable place to be, most of the time. But as much as everyone knew everyone and everyone got along, there was one man, a much older man, that was sort of off, I guess is the best way to put it.
He never came outside for the cookouts or to sit by the fire with us and share stories. We will call this man Jack. Jack was nice enough, and I think for the most part he was just lovely. His wife had passed away long before, and his children or friends never came to visit, and I cannot say why no one came to visit him. I'm sure there are different reasons. I can tell you for one thing, there was a very horrible smell that came from his apartment. Even if he wasn't in the hallway, you could smell it. It was very pungent and would make your stomach turn. The smell was even worse when he was in the hallway, and if you came close to him, it would bring tears to your eyes. Nonetheless, I made a point to go out of my way when I would see him to say hello and ask how he was doing. This made him take a particular liking to me. I started to notice that when I would arrive home from work, he would be standing in the hallway waiting for me so he could talk to me. This never really bothered me unless I was having a rough day from work or just from being a busy mom and wife. So there were times I would wait to walk in the door till I knew he had given up hope of catching me, or I would fly up the stairs with yelling out a quick "Hello, Jack," as to not get stuck in an hour-long conversation. After about 6 months of this occurring, he would start to hide while waiting for me to come in. He would hide around corners in the stairwells. It was starting to get to the point I was dreading to walk in the building. I would start having friends meet me in the parking lot to walk me up to my apartment on the 3rd floor so that I was not alone, or if no one could come over, I made sure to make a lot of noise walking in the building so that people were paying attention to the fact that someone was in the hallway. I just felt this was a safe option. I'm not sure why. Finally, one night, I had finally had enough and I told my husband of the way he was hiding and just creeping me out. I don't know why I waited for so long to tell him. I guess pride, not wanting to admit I was scared, so he went down and talked to Jack. After that day, he was no longer hiding. He would wait by the front door or outside if he wanted to speak to me, which made me a lot more comfortable. So, as the months went on, everyone saw less and less of Jack. We knew his health was starting to fail. I would frequently take my husband with me to go down and check on him and take some food to ensure he was still eating. This went on for several months. Then, one day, I came home from work and came in the front door. I noticed Jack had not picked up the paper from the front of his door that was dropped off in the morning. I cautiously knocked, waiting for an answer, and no one came. I knew my husband would be home in 20 minutes, so I waited downstairs to have him knock on the door to see if he could get him to answer, but again to no prevail. No one came. My mind racing, I called the police for a wellness check. They had the landlord come over and unlock the door. The smell that came out as the door opened was so pungent, you could even see the police make a face of disgust. They walked in, and he was sitting in the chair. They were in there for about 2 minutes, and then came out, and declared he was just drunk and was sleeping it off. The problem is Jack didn't drink. I let them know this, and I was ignored. I just knew something was terribly wrong. The next day I left for work, noticing that same paper was still sitting there. I was concerned, to say the least, but I did as much as I could the night before, so off to work I went. When I returned home that night, there were now 2 papers at the front of his door, and the smell seemed to be stronger than ever. I again called the police for a wellness check. Once again they arrived with the landlord and opened the door. Jack was still in the exact same spot as the night before, and again they came out and said he was just resting and left. At this point, things just were not adding up. How had he not moved an inch? Seeing him through the door, he did not appear to have any life. So back to my place, I go with more questions than answers. The next morning, I started to leave for work and the smell was just wretched. I ran back upstairs and grabbed my husband. I told him I was done waiting for the police. Something was definitely wrong. He came rushing down the stairs and pushed in the door with his shoulder. All I can say is I was correct. Jack was still sitting in his chair, but he had passed away. The same day, it was amazing to see the people come out of the woodworks to claim that they felt were theirs. They picked apart his apartment. For the amount of time they were able to stand the awful smell that had been festering there for years, and took anything they thought was of any amount of value. They took his truck, and then they all left. never to return again for the remaining items in the apartment. The next couple months went on as almost as normal, just no Jack to meet me in the hallways, and no more taking food down to him. The odd thing was, when you would walk in the halls, you could still smell the odor. It wasn't everywhere, it was just in a spot here and there. You would just walk through it, and it would make you turn your nose upwards. I asked my husband and other neighbors if they smelt it as well, and they in fact did as well. It seemed to mostly stay in the stairwell leading up to my apartment door. The rest of the apartment was asleep one night, and I was still awake due to some horrible insomnia. It was about 3 in the morning, and I laid on my bed with my legs hanging off the side. It suddenly became very cold in the bedroom, but I didn't think much of it. That seemed to be a common theme the past couple weeks anyways. But suddenly, the smell. Oh, the smell. It was in the room as well. I clearly felt 2 hands. They grabbed my ankles and started almost shaking me, almost pulling me off the bed. I was frozen in terror. I couldn't move or even yell out. I lay there and kept my eyes closed as tightly as they could seal, afraid to open them, afraid to know what I would see. The shaking stopped, yet I still could not move. I was still paralyzed with fear. When the bed shifted as if someone had laid down in bed next to me, I stayed put. I didn't want to see what I knew was there. The smell finally started to disappear, and I hopped up from the bed as quickly as I could and rushed into the living room. I knew Jack had been there to see me, but it was unsettling. I never returned to the bedroom again, and whenever I would pick up the smell in the hallways, I would kindly say, "Not today, Jack," in hopes to keep him away from coming in. I never had another encounter after that night, with the exception of the hallways. Extremely tall something sat on my bed. Alright, this one is pretty long, mostly because I tend to type in a narrative fashion, so I apologize. It's a decent read though, and I would love any explanation for what this thing might have been. It was 2012. I had just started college. I moved into my dorm a couple weeks before class started, as I had band camp, so I was pretty comfortable in the room by the time classes began. My roommate moved in a couple days before class. She was nice, but we didn't talk much. She spent a lot of evenings out with friends and sometimes didn't come back until late at night. I wasn't quite the night owl. Band had me exhausted physically, and a barrage of classes had me exhausted mentally, so I usually didn't stay up past 10. A few weeks into the semester, something strange happened. I had just gone to bed, and my roommate was still out somewhere. Now, I think I may have a slight touch of insomnia. Undiagnosed, of course, because it takes me forever to fall asleep, and I tend to wake up a few times each night. On a really good night, it takes me only half an hour to fall asleep, but typically, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. Oh, and I've tried everything to fall asleep faster, and nothing seems to help very much. On that night, I was lying there, playing through this little story that's been helping me ever since I was a kid. When I hear a key in the door, I don't move. It barely disturbs me. I see red through my eyelids as my roommate opens the door, then back to black as she shuts it behind her. I hear the lock click. She walks into the bathroom, the sound of her gait now familiar to me. A minute or two later, she comes back out and stops. My bed was right in front of the bathroom door, and hers was on the other side of the room. She should have walked right past my bed, but she just stood there. It was weird but not alarming. Maybe she got a text and stopped to check it. Maybe her sleeve got caught on something. Maybe she had a rock in her shoe and wanted the door frame to steady herself. I kept playing through my story, pretending to sleep. She stood there for another 30 seconds or so, then started to move. This time it was different. I heard a foot slide slowly, then another, The sound was coming towards my bed, slowly but surely. When she got to the foot of my bed, she stopped. She stood for a few seconds, then sat on the foot of my bed. I felt her feet shift under the blanket. I let them fall towards her, my ankles resting against her back. This was definitely weird. I felt my heart begin to race. I forced myself to keep taking slow, even breaths. After a moment, I felt her move, inch by inch. I felt her body move up mine, until her face was inches from mine. I could feel her breath against my face. Warmth radiated from her body. Something was very wrong. Well, besides a woman I barely knew putting herself so close to me in the middle of the night, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Suddenly it hit me. She was still sitting at the foot of the bed. My ankles were still pressed into her back, which was now leaning slightly towards my head, yet somehow she was pressed up close to my face, close enough to feel her breath on my cheek. Whatever this was, I was convinced it wasn't my roommate. I was terrified she, or rather it, would hear my heart pounding. It was becoming nearly impossible to keep my breathing even. I struggled to keep my face from scrunching up in terror. It sat there, staring at me for what felt like hours. Somehow I knew it wanted me to look. It had to know I was awake. I could feel its arms around me, barely close enough to touch me, hands pressed into the bed for support. It didn't sound like a woman breathing. It sounded like a monster. Slow and labored and hot on my face. I wanted to look, to see what sort of creature could mimic the gait of a 5'5" woman, then stretch itself out to sit at my feet and breathe on my cheek. I fought to keep my eyes closed. Something was telling me not to lay eyes on it. Finally, after probably what was only a few seconds, it slowly lifted itself up. The arms came off the bed. Its back came to a natural upright position. It slowly stood, and my feet rocked back to where they had been. I heard it shuffle away. It shuffled all the way to the door, clicked open the lock. My vision was red through my eyelids. It shuffled out the door, closed it, then locked it back. I lay there shaking for half an hour, too terrified to move or open my eyes. Finally, I calmed down and convinced it had really gone. I opened my eyes. I was alone. I don't know how I got to sleep that night. I was probably too exhausted not to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my roommate still hadn't returned. I asked her later in the day if she had come back to the dorm, and she said she hadn't. Nothing like this has happened to me before. I have no idea what to make of it. I can guarantee you I wasn't asleep. I don't think I was experiencing sleep paralysis either. I made no attempt to move, but I also never got the feeling I couldn't move. The only other paranormal experiences I've had were minor: hearing the sound of a party through my bedroom door at night, seeing a dark figure appear suddenly at the foot of my bed, hearing footsteps outside in the middle of the day when nobody was around. Relatively minor things, I guess. But this was so real, so shocking. It didn't feel the same. It felt very sinister. The first thing that came to my mind later on was that something similar. It was something similar to the Slender Man, which I know is fake, but there's the first thing that came to my mind. This was years after I had watched Marble Hornets on YouTube, months before the Slender game came out, or at least months before I heard about it, and a year or so before I got into creepypastas, so I don't think I was taking the myth and personality in my tired mind. It had been a while since I thought about it. I don't know any way this could have been my roommate playing some sick prank either. She would have had to have help, someone to sit at my feet, and someone else to lean over my face. As if someone else was moving in the room, I would have been able to hear it. The floors were a certain material, and the walls were brick. There was no fan or anything else making noise, just a quiet mini fridge and the air conditioner, which also doesn't put off much noise. If you drop a cotton ball, the other person heard it. I don't see any way they could have managed it. Anyways, if anyone has any suggestions for what it was, I'm open. Otherwise, enjoy my only truly creepy story. Bright flashes of light in pure dark room. I need some feedback to a very creepy event that happened to me last night. So I'm laying in bed late night, 1 a.m., and I can't sleep. I don't suffer from insomnia or anything like that. It's just normal for me to stay up hours into the night before falling asleep. As I lay in bed, eyes wide awake, staring into the darkness, thinking about stuff like normal. I keep my bedroom pitch black to help sleep. I see the brightest flash of light that illuminated the entire room. It wasn't from a source like a camera flash, or a circuit blowing, or light bulb bursting, lighting outside, transformer exploding, nothing like that. Everything flashed an intense bright white light, not blinding or stinging bright, but a bright flash of luminescence where everything in my vision and room was white bright for a second. Almost like a crack of light from somewhere flooded the room for a brief instance. So I lay there in the darkness, freaking out, eliminating possibilities. Am I going crazy? Debating whether to wake my lady up that is next to me sound asleep like usual. After 5 minutes pass, I'm like, well, it was just once. Let me close my eyes and just fall asleep. And flash, it happened again. This time I had my eyes closed trying to sleep, but I felt and saw my eyelids go red from the flash, like if you looked into the sun with your eyes closed. This time I was surely not going crazy, twice in about 5 minutes. I'm a realist, non-religious, skeptic of all things. I know what I saw last night. First thing this morning I wake up and Google what happened, and I guess I'm not the only one who has had this bright flash from no particular source. Late at night and dark room thing happen. Any thoughts? Reoccurring presence. Well, the story starts off when I'm in my 3rd year of university, renting a house with some friends. I lived in the basement of this house the previous year. Then the people upstairs moved out and we took over the upstairs. When I was in the basement, I don't recall anything happening. Anyways, basically, I just started to constantly be woken up in the middle of the night. And I would like to clarify that I felt a distinct difference between waking up where your body just decides it's time to wake up versus being woken up. What I mean by this is, there's a different feeling of just waking up on your own versus someone or something disturbing your sleep to wake you up. So this would keep happening, and I would wake up with this terrible sense of dread and the feeling of a presence. And the presence was almost always focused in the same spot, right in front of my closet. I didn't see a solid shape of a person or anything like that, but it felt like it was almost cloudy and dark in the area that I felt a presence. I never told anybody about these feelings. Then I started dating a girl, and she spent the night in my room many times. After a little while, I asked her, "Have you ever woken up at night and felt something?" And before I could tell her of my experience, she said she felt a really strange presence, and that it was in the same location in front of my closet. This kept happening for a few months. And then, when the school year was over, I moved back home. But it seemed that the presence followed me, and after being back home, it started to happen more frequently, and it was a lot more intense. There were months where almost every night something would happen. I would wake up and feel a terrible panic and anxiety, and the feeling that there was definitely something in the room. Sometimes it felt like multiple things. Now, I would also like to say that I've dealt with insomnia for many years, and I've experienced sleep paralysis and disturbing nightmares and such, but these occurrences felt different from all those. I've always had trouble sleeping, but usually once I'm able to pass out, I'm out until the next day. But these disturbances literally jolt me right awake in the middle of the night. Anyways, this goes on for a long time, and I just accept it as a part of my life. Sometimes I can go a week without an incident. Sometimes it could happen 10 days in a row, and it's very hard to describe the exact feeling. It feels dark and sinister, but at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like I'm in grave danger, or that it has pure evil intentions. But so anyways, I start dating a new girl, and she starts sleeping over at my place, and pretty much after the first or second night, she begins to tell me how messed up it is sleeping inside my room, and she describes to me the same kind of feeling, and in the same location that I see it. And then on a couple occasions, we literally both wake up at the same time and just look at each other and say, "You feel that too?" But there have also been a few instances of physical things happening. I've had my bedside lamp shut off on me. It's the kind where you have to twist a knob twice to turn it on, twice to turn it off, and when I twisted it again after, it came back on. Also, I have a trophy shelf above my bed, and on a couple different occasions, I've had a trophy fall onto me in the middle of the night. I've also had my bedroom door open itself multiple times, and once or twice, I saw something on my floor move when I was wide awake, like a pile of clothes. Anyways, sorry for so much text. Basically, this all started to happen to me about 4 to 5 years ago, and has been a reoccurring thing ever since. Sometimes it happens almost every day, and then I can go a little while without anything. It's quite random. But anyways, I just wanted to share my story with you guys, and see if there are similar experiences. Anyone teleported in their sleep? Like most people, I've seen a few strange things, but there is one incident in particular that's always stuck out to me, and I think you'll see why. This isn't a narrative or anything, and it's a little difficult to explain, so try and bear with me. When I was a teenager, my best friend stayed the night. I slept upstairs in my room, and he slept downstairs. The downstairs guest room door opened into the room and had a broken doorknob so couldn't close. For privacy, he wedged the base of a tall, standing fan against the door from inside the room, acting like a doorstop. There is no other way into or out of the room, except for a window that could no longer open. The door to my room upstairs also opened into the room, but wasn't broken. I was, however, keeping it purposefully open about half a foot, and then stopped with a box fan to pull air in, and also keep it opening any farther. My room was on the second floor, and also had no second point of entry, save for a window that also did not open, and was furthermore blocked by a desk. I should also mention I was a very light sleeper, and suffered from insomnia, still do. Okay, now the weird thing. I woke up in the middle of the night, and thought I saw a big shape in the middle of the room where there shouldn't be one. I clicked on my nightstand light and saw my friend, sitting cross-legged in the middle of my room. I called out his name, and he appeared to be asleep. He slowly woke up and looked around the room, clearly confused. He swore he had no idea how he got there, and looked legitimately concerned. So, the door was exactly as I left it, with only half a foot opening it, and it would have been impossible for him to get in without knocking over my box fan, which would have immediately woken me up. After we talked about what happened and calmed down a bit, already coming up with some lame excuse about sleepwalking to try and make ourselves feel better, I followed him downstairs to the guest room. Only we couldn't open the door. It still had the fan base wedge to keep it closed from inside the room. Has something similar ever happened to anyone else? Or do you know of any similar cases?